Kim Kardashian. This name represented not just one woman, but the face of an entire age. The goddess of social media, the unchanging star of cameras, a figure known by billions, but no one really knows. It was easy to see him on TV. The images shining on Instagram, the looks frozen on the magazine covers. But in real life, it was something else to see them in front of you, breathing. And I was one of the few people who were admitted into that world, stuck to the innermost people. When I was hired, my hands were shaking with joy. My friends said, "You are living a dream." My parents repeated, "This is your luck." I, on the other hand, promised myself that this opportunity will change my life. I was right. It changed my life. But not the way I thought. On my first day, when I walked through the door of that huge mansion in Beverly Hills, I was greeted by silence. Luxurious furniture, crystal chandeliers, gold-detailed mirrors. They all looked perfect, but I had a strange feeling, as if all this splendor was just a scene. Even the paintings hanging on the wall were staring at me blankly. The weather inside was heavier than usual. My lungs seemed to slow down as I breathed. And then he appeared. Kim Kardashian. She had a simple outfit on, but even her simplicity was designed. His walk was moderate, his gaze was dull. Everyone was whispering around him, adjusting their steps accordingly. He was doing one thing, to smile. Yes, that smile we've seen a million times on TV. But seeing it live wasn't like seeing it on TV. That smile resembled a mask more than something human. A mask that never disappears, etched under his face. At that moment, his gaze touched mine for a moment. There was a strange glint in his eyes. Not black, not brown. A depth that I can't define. What I saw in those eyes didn't look like a human look. As I looked, it was as if I was withdrawing in, drowning. My heart raced. I had to miss my eyes. During the first week I started working, I noticed little oddities. In photo shoots, no matter how strong the lights were, his shadow was sometimes missing. When I looked next to the tripod, everyone's shadow was on the ground, but Kim's shadow disappeared, as if rejecting the light. This became even more obvious when I looked at it from the viewfinder of the cameras. What the lens saw and what my eyes saw did not hold together. Even more strange things happened in the sound recording room. Even with the microphones off, a thin, high-pitched whisper came from my headphones. A single word, "Don't look." I thought it was an error in the assembly software in the first one. I checked the cables in the second one. But when it was the third time, I took out the headphones and threw them on the floor. Still, that word echoed in my head. Don't look. One day I was alone in the same room with him. We never talked. He was sitting at the table, scrolling on his phone. But the silence spreading to the room was indescribable. It was as if an invisible weight hit my chest. It got hard to swallow. I was out of breath. Just then, Kim raised his head. We came face to face. His lips couldn't move, but I heard very clearly, "You're not here." An icy shiver fell on me. I turned around and walked towards the door. While holding the door handle, I noticed my shadow was extending to the door. But no shadow was falling on the floor from the seat he was sitting on. Over time, I realized that I was not the only one. The other people on the team were also aware of something. A makeup artist fainted in the middle of the shoot and never came back. An assistant left the next day at the expense of being fired. Everyone was avoiding talking, but whispers were circulating. If you stay with him too long, he consumes you. That's when I knew. This job was not just a career step. I was getting into something. And Kim Kardashian, maybe the person she showed to the world has never been. There was another face that the cameras could not capture, the human eye could not make sense of. And I looked into the wrong eyes in my first weeks next to Kim Kardashian, everything seemed almost normal. But that word, almost, soon turned into the biggest detail that gnawed at my life. Program shoots, fashion events, brand meetings. They were all moving in a perfect order. Kim was always a bright, smiling figure, as if holding the world in his palm. But what I felt behind the scenes was very different from her smile. It was getting more intense when you were in the same room with him. It wasn't a simple stress or the pressure to be around a celebrity. Indeed, it was as if the oxygen was getting heavier. It was getting harder to breathe. Several times, one of the sound technicians fainted in the meeting room and fell to the ground. The excuse was the same every time: insomnia. But I knew this was more than insomnia. Once Kim passed by us, he lightly touched my arm. A normal contact. It seemed so. But the coldness remained for days where his fingers touched. A coldness that is not from my skin, but in my bone. While I was sleeping at night, I could feel that cold again, as if it had come to my room. The walls of the studio began to behave differently. On the giant screens hanging in the corridors, images from Kim's old shots were played. One day when I was going to the assembly room, I caught my eye on the screen. For a brief moment, Kim was looking at me. Not to the camera, but from the screen to me. We came face to face. Then the image immediately became normal. No one noticed that moment. But my heart hasn't calmed down for days. Even worse, there were people who disappeared. Intern first. He didn't come one morning. The next day they said he left work, then makeup, then the light technician. What they all left behind was the same: silence. No one talks about them. Their names were quickly deleted from the meeting lists. Their existence seemed to be written to be forgotten. One evening, when I was leaving the studio late, I saw Kim alone. The cameras were off. There was no one. He was sitting in the middle of the stage. He didn't have a phone in his hand. He was sitting with his eyes fixed on one point, without moving. But the strange thing was, it had no shadow. Although the lights were on, there was no shadow on the ground. After a few seconds, he turned his head to me. His lips echoed in my mind without moving. "You're still here." I winked. At that moment, there was no one on the stage. After that day, the line between reality and fantasy gradually began to be erased. Staying in the studio after midnight was something that no one preferred. It was not officially banned, but all the employees would leave the building before dark. I was forced to be there that night. There were scenes he had to catch up with for the editing, and the crew was already gone. There was only the hum of security cameras and the whisper of power lines in the building. Everything was normal at first. Kim's interview recording a few days ago was spinning on the computer screen. I watched it many times. He answers the questions with a smile, tilts his head slightly to the side, talking in perfect poses. But after a few minutes, the image flickered. There was an interruption. The audio recording was broken for a moment, and when he came back, everything was not the same. Kim's eyes had turned into a black void. His lips couldn't move, but a very clear whisper echoed in my headphones. "You can't escape." I took out the headphones and threw them aside. At that moment, the temperature of the studio suddenly dropped. When I looked at the computer screen again, the image was normalized. Still, something had changed in me. That word seemed to be engraved in my brain. I took a deep breath, closed the files, and left the room. The corridor was empty. Images from different sections were circulating on the screens, hanging on the walls. Normally ads, fashion scenes, brand logos. But that night they were all showing the same thing. Who? He was sitting in the middle of the stage. He was neither talking nor laughing. He was just looking. And I was always the direction of that look. Wherever I turned, his eyes followed me. I quickened my steps. My heart seemed to break my chest. I wanted to go into the sink and wash my face. Thought I'd come to myself for a while under the cold water. But when I looked up in the mirror, I couldn't see my own reflection. Above the tiles on the floor, under the fluorescent lights, behind me was only Kim. It was right next to my shoulders. The reflection leaned towards me. His lips whispered without moving. "You are a part of me now." I tried to scream, but no sound came out of my throat. Its reflection began to melt before my eyes. Her face, her mask, all her beauty was dissolved like a black void. There is a smooth, empty face that has nothing to do with people. I slammed the door and run out. Something caught my attention while I was running in the corridors. A bag forgotten in the corner. It was the missing intern's bag. It was said, "Left work" a day ago. But the ID card, phone charger, and notebook were still there. I opened the notebook. Most of the pages were full of normal notes, but the last page was filled with a single sentence. The same sentence over and over again, with a shaky text. "He's not with us. It doesn't belong to us." I dropped the notebook. I heard footsteps, slow, heavy, and rhythmic. He was coming from behind. I saw Kim when I got back, but it wasn't who everyone knew. There was no smile on his face. Her hair was casting a shadow on her face. His eyes did not belong to man. It was a deep, bottomless void. There was something else moving in that darkness. Something moving, something living. "You learned a lot about him," he said. But his lips didn't move. The sound was coming from inside my mind. "Now it's your turn." All the lights went out one by one. The corridors were buried in pitch darkness. I tried to turn on the light of my phone, but the screen was pitch black. All I could see was those eyes, two dark voids approaching me. I took my steps back, but wherever I went, the walls would close. It was as if the building was changing its own form, dragging me not to the exit, but to the center, towards the core. The door of a room was wide open. I went in. The room was familiar. Assembly room. But the walls were covered with screens, hundreds of screens. And they all had Kim. Some on the red carpet, some on the catwalk, some in the ordinary home environment. But one thing in common. None of them had their eyes like humans. He was looking the same on every screen. A deep, consumer, suffocating look. My ears started to buzz. Whispers rose. Hundreds of voices overlapped. They were saying the same word. "Stay." My knees are untied. A pair of hands stretched out from the inside of the screens. Cold, long fingers wrapped around my wrists. I couldn't move. All my strength was withdrawn. And at that moment, Kim's voice rose clearly above the other sounds. This time it echoed not only in my mind, but in the whole room. "Don't resist. I will write your face for a moment." I saw my own reflection on one of the screens, but it wasn't me. He was the union of my face and Kim's face. Not my eyes, but his empty black eyes were looking at me. My footsteps echoed like a scream as I walked in the corridors. But that voice didn't belong to me. It was as if the inside of the studio was breathing, sucking my steps and repelling again. I turned to every corner, but I come across the same poster again. Kim Kardashian, smiling, a perfect face. But his eyes were changing. A moment of man, a moment of emptiness. His lips curl slightly, but a dullness, a threat is hidden in his smile. A door appeared, wooden, heavy, as if it wanted to accept its existence. I took my hand to the handle. My fingers trembled like ice. I opened the door, and an endless hall appeared in front of me. The lights hanging from the ceiling are flickering. There was no reflection on the floor. Kim was sitting in the middle seat. But this Kim is no longer just human. His face was constantly changing. His eyes were turning like darkness in the void. "You're close," he said. His voice was a union of thousands of echoes, with a command that works into my brain. "Accept it." My knees shivered. I wanted to take a step back, but the floor seemed to be nailed. Kim's eyes were locked on me. There were lost faces in them. The lost interns, the technicians, the makeupists. They were all there somehow, melted, but still alive. The walls vibrated. The screens opened. I arrived in each of them. But there was something else on a screen. My face and Kim's face were combined. My eyes are black. My smile is like hers. What fell into me was not fear, but acceptance. Whispers turned into screams. We. Kim got up from his seat. I didn't hear his footsteps. There was no sound on the ground. But with every step, my heart became heavier. When he came to me, his face was human. Acquaintance Kim Kardashian. But his eyes were still empty. Everyone saw me, he said, but no one really saw it. You saw it. He touched his cold fingers to my cheek. An icy feeling spread under the skin. Now you will see it too. At that moment, the darkness of the hall fell on me. The screens exploded. Not the pieces of glass, but the memories were scattered. Childhood, family, first memories. All shattered. All that's left is his voice. Don't resist. Your identity belongs to me. I got down on my knees. I closed my eyes, but his voice was engraved in my brain. I was no longer just a spectator. I was one of these endless masks. Every time I took a breath, the hall changed. The lights were red, purple, black, all flashing at the same time. The steam coming out of the ground pierced my skin like a cold wind. Images from the past and the future appeared on the screens. My childhood, my school days, every moment I lived in the studio. But in every frame there was Kim's face. Sometimes it was mixed with my own face. Sometimes it looked like a completely different dark face. My perception of time collapsed. Minutes passed like hours, seconds like days. The place was changing. The corridors were repeating themselves. Posters and screens were constantly offering different faces. At that moment, I understood. There is no escape, no resistance. Kim Kardashian is no longer human. She is the living representation of darkness, control, and fear. And I'm part of it now. Whispers were no longer falling on me like words, but entities. We. You are with us. Don't resist. Accept it. I looked at that seat. Kim wasn't just sitting anymore. He had become an entity that spread to every corner of the hall. He opened his arms. He didn't move, but every move caused the space to reshape itself. The walls were flickering, the lights were flashing, the screens were mixing. Every look of him was in my brain, eroding my soul. I collapsed on the floor, closed my eyes, but the hall was still spinning. Kim's voice was in every corner of my brain. You are a part of me now. No resistance. There is no escape. You are us. We are all with you. Suddenly, the temperature of the room went down to 0. My breath seemed to freeze. His hands touched my shoulders. I couldn't see his face, but his presence worked all over my body. Screams echoed in my brain. My heart was beating without rhythm. With each breath, Kim's presence was a little more in me. And that's when I realized I was no longer just an observer, but a link of the endless chain of darkness that he created. My own existence was melting, replaced by Kim's control, Kim's darkness, Kim's voice. My soul was now living in the walls of the hall, on the screens, in whispers. The hall suddenly became quiet, but the silence was scarier than the storm. The floor did not return to normal again. Posters, screens, walls were still moving. Every step I took was opening to an infinity. Who was no longer just sitting. He was the judge of space, time, my memories. And I knew there was no turning back. I became a part of it. And now the endless good had begun. When a cold silence engulfed the corridors, my every step echoed, my shadows stretched and twisted. The ground trembled slightly as if it was alive. It gave a sense of resistance in every step. The walls were breathing. The lights were flashing of their own free will. My heart beats like it was going to jump out of my chest. With each breath, Kim Kardashian's presence was felt more intensely. The place expanded for a moment, then twisted. The corridors turned into an endless maze. Kim, who was sitting in the middle of the hall, was now beyond the human form. His eyes were a bottomless void. His lips were still. His presence filled the entire space. When I came face to face with him, I was out of breath, as if all my will was slowly melting. "You're with us now," he said, his voice working directly into my brain. "No resistance. You can't escape." The corridors were stretching and bending. Each poster and screen combined the past with the future. Interns and technicians, who were once lost, appeared in front of me as a silhouette. His eyes are empty, his lips do not move, but their presence was moving like a shadow under Kim's control. Whispers teared my brain apart, each breath sucking in Kim's darkness. "It's us. You are now a part of us." My heart was beating like crazy. I fell to my knees, closed my eyes, but the whispers were still echoing in my brain. Kim's voice was rising from every corner of the place, sucking me in. My perception of time has completely collapsed. Minutes, hours, years mixed together. The corridors were constantly changing. The place was dragging me to the same point over and over again. Every step, every breath was like a test. Every breath made Kim feel his presence. Suddenly, I saw my own face on the screens. My eyes were black, my lips were curled. My smile was combined with Kim's mask. With the feeling of self melting inside me, whispers turned into screams. "You are with us." No resistance. "You can't escape who approached me." His hands touched my shoulders. His touch was cold, wet and lively. My brain was frozen. My thoughts were shattered. I didn't have my own will anymore. Every breath, every movement was combined with Kim's darkness. The hall suddenly expanded. The ceilings were pulled up. The walls were bent. The lights exploded. The steams coming out of the floor took my breath away, making me heavier with every step. Silhouettes, faces, whispers. They all surround me, tear my soul apart, melting inside me every moment. Who spoke? All the audience saw you. But your soul is here now. You can't escape. The screens exploded. In each of them, my past, memories, fears, hopes. All of them were filtered through Kim's eyes. On the one hand, he was laughing. On the other hand, he was staring blankly. On the other hand, he was whispering, "You are with us. Nothing is yours anymore." The hall became quiet, but the silence was scarier than the storm. The floor was not fixed. Posters, screens, and walls were still moving. Every step, every breath was like passing through a maze. Who didn't just sit anymore? He was the judge of space and time. There was no escape. Each corner offers a different reality. Each step was full of past and future memories. The missing technicians and interns were acting like a reflection of darkness under Kim's control. Whispers were tearing my brain apart, emptying my mind. Every sound is a different fear, a different threat. Each breath made Kim's presence more intense. My own steps and breath no longer belonged to me. I wasn't a spectator, I was part of his darkness. And that moment came. Who stood in front of me? His eyes were completely empty. His lips did not move, only his presence was piercing around. His hands touched my shoulders. His touch was cold and moist. Screams echoed in my brain. My heart beat rhythmlessly. Now all my will was gone. "You are now a part of us," he said. "No resistance. You can't escape. We are all here, and you are now a part of us." Time collapsed. The place was completely lost. Now only Kim and I have arrived. Its existence was more intense, more oppressive with each breath. The weight that worked inside me was suppressing my thoughts, making me forget who I was. I no longer had my own self. Every breath, every step, every thought was mixed into his darkness. The screens opened again. In each of them, my past, memories, fears, and hopes, all filtered through Kim's eyes. On the one hand, he was laughing. On the other hand, he was staring blankly. On the other hand, he was whispering, "You are with us. No resistance. You can't escape. We are." At that moment, I realized there is no more escape. It was impossible to resist.